Morning, everybody. So, who are freshers here? So, all of you are freshers. So, only you guys are. Okay, fine, no problem. So, I'm Imran. I work for a team called TMN. I'm going to handle the session along with one more guy called Sarabhavan, who will be handling upcoming sessions. So, in today's session, the entire agenda is not on AngularJS as such. We are going to see what are the previous frameworks which we used previously, and then what are its advantages, what are the drawbacks, and why we shifted our focus towards AngularJS, or in precise why we shifted our focus towards client-side framework. So those things we are going to see it today. Only from the upcoming sessions we are going to see in detail about AngularJS. But in order to understand what is coming in upcoming sessions, you have to understand whatever I'm going to take in this session today. So moving forward, this is going to be our agenda for today. First, we will see how a web page renders. It may look like basic stuff for experienced developers, but since I'm taking the session for freshers as well, it's important for us to understand how a web page renders and what are the functionalities that take place in web page rendering, and what is the role of a server as well as client side in the web page rendering. So those things we are going to see today. Then we are going to see the very important part, the difference between client side and server side in modern day web development. So before some 5 or 10 years back, the role of server side was very high in any web page development. But today the role of client side has increased to a greater extent. So how it has extended, why, those stuff we are going to see today. And the next thing we are going to see today is what are the different UI frameworks available and how they differ from each other. Then we see why we require JavaScript in any web development, and then why we shifted our focus towards jQuery, and then why we shifted our focus towards client-side framework. There's a huge difference in between these three. Even though everything depends on the JavaScript, there are certain differences where we decided to move ourselves from JavaScript to jQuery and then from jQuery to client-side frameworks. Then we are going to see about how a client-side framework basically works. Because only if we understood how it works, then we can, moving forward, learn about AngularJS, how AngularJS works and all. So in order to understand that, we have to first understand how a client-side framework works. So that's what we are going to see today. And finally, we will have a slight overview about what all the other client-side frameworks are available. Because AngularJS is not the only client-side framework available with us. We have so many other client-side frameworks, but compared to all those frameworks, I'll not say AngularJS is the best one, but it is most easier one because there's a lot of market resources available, as well as it has its own advantages, because of which we are working with AngularJS when compared to the other client-side framework. So in precise, this is going to be today's agenda. So this is going to be very simple. If you have any questions, please interrupt me. Let's have a discussion. Okay? The first thing, as I said, it's very basic stuff. How a web page renders, we have to understand that. So basically, as you all know, we have two different type of applications: desktop and web applications. In desktop applications, it's a different game. When it comes to web application, it starts from the moment when we type a URL in a browser, right? So the browser, whatever you see in the browser is going to be the user interface which we are going to communicate with. So from the moment you are going to type something in your browser, in the URL, the web page rendering starts. So for example, let's say www.facebook.com. Just type it and click enter. What happens then? The moment you enter the address in the prefer bar, first step that happens is parsing. Parsing is nothing but every web page has its own address. Must be knowing about it, right? So what are the components of the address? Protocol, host, port. So all these things are present in every address. So it has to pass that address and find whether any existing connection is there. For example, if Facebook closes its server, whatever you type here, nothing is going to happen because the connection is closed on the backend. So it has to first identify whether any open connection is existing. So once it's identified whether the open connection is existing, it communicates with the server. Okay. So you know what is the difference between client and the server, right? So client is what you see in your browser in your machine, and server is some other machine where the entire program is existing. You know, basic difference. So basically what happens, a client has to look whether a server is actively in open connection or not. Only if there is an open connection, then what happens, this request goes to the server. And the role of server is huge actually. Once the request comes, it has to identify what does the request basically consist of. For example, whether it's a RESTful request, whether it's a GET request or put or post or delete, or whether it has to query the database, whether it has to open a connection to the database, whether it has to query the database, whether it has to form any results, whether it has to render only JSON data, or whether it has to render only HTML page. So all these things will be taken care by the server. As of now, we'll restrict ourselves to the limit like the server is going to respond to your request. Okay. So once the response comes back from the server, whatever data we have will be rendered in the client browser. Then browser itself has its own operations, like it has to manipulate the data which is coming from the server, because whatever data which is coming from the server will be like a plain string of HTML. So that is not what you are going to see in your page. It has to do additional stuff, like for example, if you are giving any style information, that style has to be applied to that HTML page. If you are going to do some validations, that has to be applied. Then it has to build a DOM tree. Everyone is aware of the DOM, right? Document Object Model. A tree will be built. And once the tree is built and once validations are over, once the style sheets are over, a nice page will be rendered to us. Okay, so right from the moment you type a URL into a browser till the page is rendered, all these things happens in a page life cycle, and all these things is a part of web page rendering. You must be thinking, why I am explaining web page rendering in an Anglo session? The reason is the way the web page renders, say 10 years back, is completely different from the way web page renders today. The role of web servers in before say 5 or 10 years back is very huge. Web server was doing so many things before it renders a page to us. But nowadays what happened, all the load, all the focus is shifted predominantly to the client side. So client side means the JavaScript. JavaScript is doing a lot of work nowadays when compared to what server was doing, when is equivalent to what server was doing all these days. So because of this reason only I explained why a web page is rendering. So how it differs we will see in the upcoming slides. Okay. So you are aware of why I explained web page rendering, right? The role of server is used previously, now the role of JavaScript has increased. Okay. So only since the role of JavaScript has increased, we are migrating ourselves to the client-side frameworks like AngularJS, Backbone.js, etc. So this is what I said. The browser receives the response and passes the HTML. A DOM tree is built. Then style sheets are passed. Then JavaScript is passed. And finally the page is rendered. So basically this is how your final page outcome will be. But whatever will be returned from the server is not like this. It will be a single string of HTML content. Okay. Now we will see. I told you there are two basic parts of web page rendering, server side and client side. We'll see what is the difference. First, server. What and all the functions a server involves is, first processes the user input. For example, let us say you have a web page and you are going to search something. Say I'm going to search in Facebook, I'm going to search a name called Imran. So once the string Imran goes to the backend server, it processes the input and then render pages to the clients. Why I have highlighted that part pages means, till now when the development is completely based on the server side, a page will be completely rendered back to the client. Okay, and the role of the browser is just to receive the page which you are receiving from the server and show it to the user. till now. So basically whatever HTML page, HTML content you are going to see, everything will be processed by the server and it will be returned to the client. And the role of client is very simple, just get it, do some manipulations, do some parsing and show it to the user. Till now. But that is going to change in the client side, which we will see later. Then the other things are common, you must be knowing about it. Interact with SQL or whatever database is available, do business operations. So these things are going to remain in the server side itself. But the main part of rendering page has been shifted to client, because of which the performance is going to increase. Okay. The advantage of having a server-side development is, I'm not saying like since a client has started a lot of responsibility by itself, we should stop using server at all. It is not like that. It also has several advantages. So any application which we are going to build in the future is going to be hybrid. It's going to be a combination of server and client. But how much pressure, how much load you are going to put on the server is going to differ. So saying that, the advantages of the server-side development is it processes the user input, then it displays the requested pages. So the client doesn't have to do anything. The page, once it is rendered, it will be shown like this. So the browser doesn't have to do so many things. Then structuring the web applications, interacting with the databases, querying the databases. Then once the data comes from the database, encoding it in a format like, for example, when I search the user Imran, so many information will be coming, my age, my profile, my city and all. But it's a raw data. So formatting of the raw data into the visual things, right? So name equal to Imran, location equal to Chennai. All these things will be formatted by the server side itself. So all these things will be handled by the server side if you don't have client at all. Now, the disadvantage, you may think like the list of advantages are very high, but the disadvantage is very low. But these two disadvantages itself, the main reason why we are migrating towards the client-side framework. First thing is page goes back. You might have noticed a lot of websites today. So whenever you search something, no page goes back happens. You notice it, right? So any social networks you take today or any big sites like Flipkart, Amazon and all, no post back at all. So once the page is rendered, it's rendered. Whatever you do after that inside the page, like searching, filtering, doing, nothing happens on the post back. So that is one of the main drawbacks which made us to shift from the server side to the client side. Here I want to give you a small example. It may sound silly, but it will explain you. Let us assume you are going to a restaurant. Okay, there are 2 employees in the restaurant who is going to serve you, and it is expected like for example 100 clients may visit that restaurant every day. Okay, assume the first person who is working in the restaurant is a presenter, like for example in our case it's UI. The other person who is working in the restaurant is the one who is going to create data, that is the server side part. Now I visited the restaurant, I want some food in the restaurant. Just imagine if both the workers who are present there are telling you, just wait here for some time, we both go inside, we'll prepare the food and bring it to you. So this is scenario 1. Okay, I ordered for some food, both of them went inside, that's it, they disappeared, then they created everything and finally they presented. The food was very nice, but it took some time for both of them to go to the room, then prepare the food, kitchen and come back and serve it to them. Okay. Now I am giving a second scenario. I am visiting the restaurant, same thing. The presenter is remaining there. He is not going inside. Okay. The other guy who is working in the restaurant goes inside, prepares food, send it to the presenter, and without any difference, the presenter simply presents the food to the customer. Okay. Which scenario you will like? Obviously second, because the customer doesn't have to wait till both of them returns. It basically irritates them. This is the simple difference between client-side frameworks and the server-side frameworks which were available till now. Okay, so what happens here technically means, till now, as I said in my previous slide, the server returns the HTML page to the client. But in client-side framework, what happened? the HTML content will remain on the client side itself. So rather than sending the HTML page, it will send a simple JSON data from server to the client. Okay, let me explain it visually. So basically this is the difference. So both are clients and both are server, and this is a SPA, which is a single page application lifecycle, and this is a traditional page lifecycle. So we'll first talk about this. So till now, whenever you type some URL, an initial request goes to the server. Here also it goes same. HTML page is written. Here also HTML page is written, but there is a huge difference in it. Whatever content which is present in the HTML content will have all the results till now. So for example, right from header to footer, whatever contents in that, for example, we take the same social networking example itself, the Facebook page, whatever you see, entire thing will be processed by the server and will be written in this HTML. Okay? But in this client-side framework, in this HTML, you will not have entire content at all. You will have only the container, which is going to hold your data. Okay? So what is the advantage means? For example, if a user wants to do some other action inside that page, what we will do, for example, search for some name means he will post a request to the server. Again, the entire thing will go to the server, processing happens, and again the entire HTML page comes. So in the due process, the page will be traveling from client to server so many times, which may cause a lot of wastage of time, wastage of resources and all. But in this single page application, what happens? Only first time the container returns. From then onwards, whatever data which is required by the client will be sent using an AJAX call or RESTful Web API, and only JSON data will be returned. Okay, and this JSON data will be passed and shown to the client, which is basically we have a container already available, right? So this JSON data will be passed and shown in this HTML. So what happens here? This step is avoided. Any doubts till now? Understood the difference? Why postback doesn't happen? Understood, right?
Can you please explain what is Ajax and JSON? Like how exactly they are different and
Ajax and
JSON?
what difference between Ajax and JSON basically?
What that?
Yeah. For example, JSON looks like this. Special, right? JSON is nothing but a simple array of data. Okay? It contains only data. For example, key value pairs. Like that. Okay? A layman cannot understand JSON data. Okay? This will be returned by the API from the backend. Okay? And this data will be passed and shown to the user understandable format by the browser. Okay? So for example, say I have a container already where I have given like this name. So once the JSON data is returned to my browser, this ABC will be filled in here and the user will be seeing ABC. And this step will be taken care by the client-side framework, which was not available previously with the server-side frameworks. In server-side framework, what happened means, whatever page are available here, right, this will be returned from the server. So all this parsing, rendering, all these things has to be done by the server, and that page will be returned to the browser. So what happens, this entire load of actions is sent to the server, and that is sent every time we make a request. If you have 10 actions in that page, 10 times the step repeats.
Format and container, everything has to be sent.
Yes. But in your client-side framework, only this request for the JSON data goes, which is very lightweight, and only the string data comes. You understand the difference, right? So that's what is mentioned there. Making interactive pages interact with temporary storage, local storage. Yeah. Forgot to tell one more advantage. You may see a term called local storage here. So in client-side framework, what happens? Predominantly, the data which is going to be reused in your screens will be stored on your client side. You may ask, if the data is very huge, how my browser is going to behave? The same doubt developers had before 10 years. But nowadays, browsers are smart, browsers are evolving, and now they are completely capable of having their own storage to some extent. So what happens, as I said here, the HTML content which is rendered first time will be staying there in my browser itself, in my client side itself. So that every time only the data changes, it simply passes the data and shows me new results. Okay. Now we will see what are the advantages of a client side. Faster response time, obviously. Less overhead on the web server. Overhead means what? Less trouble, less load which you are going to put on the web server. Then ideal when the web page elements need to be changed without need to contact the database. Any doubt in that point? So basically what he's saying means the client-side framework is ideal when the web page elements need to be changed without need to contact the database. I'll tell you an example. Let us say again I have a page where I have a drop down. Okay, let us assume the drop down consists of countries. You must have seen a drop down consists of countries, right? The moment you select country, the next drop down has to show a list of states present in it. For example, if I select India, it has to show Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, etc. Okay. So what happens here, initially when the page loads, all this data will not be loaded. Only the list of countries is loaded and shown here. Okay. If I select a particular country, what happens? Page won't renders, a page no postback happens. A request simply goes to the server. Okay. User doesn't know that a request has went actually, and that server returns the response to this drop down, and the data will be rendered. Just imagine if you have to do this using a ASP.NET Web Forms or MVC, what happens? The moment you selected something here, the postback happens, entire thing goes to the server, then take the data, page will be formed, and this new drop-down will be binded along with this drop-down. But when you change this, there is no necessity to change to bind this drop-down again at all, right? Only this drop-down has to be changed. So that's what it means. The other things are very simple actually, making interactive pages, making stuffs work dynamically. Yeah. It also again, when you support something, obviously they also have some disadvantages. The first thing is routing. When I explain MVC, or I hope you guys are familiar with MVC. If some of you are not aware about MVC, one of the best things that MVC provides is routing, a secure routing. With MVC we can have a secure routing. That kind of security is not available with client-side frameworks. But again, as I said earlier, they are evolving. People are developing stuff so that you can, routing is already there in the client-side framework, but the amount of security that gives with MVC is not available with the client-side framework. So if you ask me how this can be handled, means again I will say you can have a hybrid application. So you can have MVC at the top and client-side frameworks at the bottom. So routing will be handled by the MVC and UI stuff will be dynamically handled by the client-side frameworks. But we expect in near future there will also some client-side frameworks which will handle routing as secure as MVC does. So it also has disadvantages, but very minimal. Then the next one is scripting language require more time and effort. So those who are developing a server-side, those who are familiar with server-side development will find it little bit difficult to migrate themselves to the JavaScript or client-side framework code. But if you are practicing it to some extent, it will be easy in few days. Okay. So web page rendering is over. The difference between a client-side and server-side framework is over. Any doubts till now? Anything, even silly doubts. So you all understood what is the difference between client-side and server-side rendering, right? The next thing which we are going to see is we are going to compare the existing frameworks to the client-side framework. So existing framework means I'm not going to too many stuff. I'm just going to compare three basic things: web forms, MVC, and client-side framework. Okay. You all must be aware of this picture. So how a web form performs. I'm not going to explain all these things and all. But only thing I'm going to tell from this slide is most of the things which you see in this slide is handled by the server. That's the core point we have to take from it. Most of the things which are present here will be handled by the server, and the role of HTML in browser is very minimal. So the pros of existing ASP.NET web forms is you have already built-in controls in it. You know that, right? You have so many controls on the left side, drop downs, text boxes and all. You can simply drag and drop and use it. It's very simple. But if you migrate to the client-side framework or MVC, you have to write your own HTML code. It's both advantage and disadvantage. I'll say disadvantages later. Second thing is event-driven programming. Again, very simple. Just drag a button, double click it, you will get a event on the back CS file. You can write whatever you want in that CS file. Again, for the developers, it's very easy. And the third thing is view state. Again, view state has both advantages and disadvantages, but sometimes view state is used to maintain the data on the control level itself. Okay, so these are the pros of the web form. Now coming to the cons, let's say business functionality is the UI control event handler. There is a tight coupling. What do you mean by tight coupling here? What is coupling basically? Connectivity. Okay. So basically what happens, whenever you write an application, the first thing that will be taught to you is every layer should have its own responsibility. We also call it as separation of concerns. So if it's a front end, it has to do only front end stuff. If it's a back end, it has to do only back end stuff. Since you are writing most of the code in the CS file of your events itself, you will do mistakes like, or you will do regular stuff like writing business stuff in your UI layer itself. So what happens then? You cannot test UI or business separately. So that is called as tight coupling. In ASP.NET Web Form, since you are writing all your code in the CS file itself, since that coupling is very tight, you cannot separate the work into different layers. Okay. Next thing is, many developers would have faced this difficulty. If you want to manipulate existing controls which are present in the ASP.NET Web Form, you will find it very difficult, right? For example, if there is a button, means it has an event. You are restricted to that. If you want to modify the color of the button on the click, on hover, you have to do so many other stuff. It's little bit difficult when compared to normal HTML if you have the control of HTML over it. Okay, so these are the disadvantages of the web forms. So then what we decided, okay, we don't want tight coupling between UI and server side, or business, we will move to the MVC. So again, I'm not going to explain MVC life cycle too much because it's known to everybody. But the difference between MVC and ASP.NET Web Form is, in MVC there is a separate HTML which is completely under your control, right? So text boxes, drop down, grid, whatever and all, you have to write those things using table or something like that. So what happens here, you have complete control of your HTML and you can manipulate it as you want. Second thing is, there is no tight coupling between UI and business in MVC, right? So what is MVC? Model View Controller. View is going to take care of your HTML alone, and controller is going to take care of decision making, routing and all. And in the model you have the data. So everything is separated to different layers. Okay. So again, with MVC you can have HTTP operations which you cannot do using ASP.NET Web Forms, and you have complete control over your HTML output, clear code separation and all. But again, it has some disadvantages like no rich user interfaces like what you have in Web Forms. In Web Forms you have already developed controls you can drag and drop and use, which is not there in MVC. And maintaining state for UI control is difficult because it's a plain HTML. You have to write code to manage it. Now, we are coming to actual the client side part now. So a traditional website basically looks like this. Is what I explained all this throughout all these slides. In a traditional website, the role of backend is very huge. It does so many things, and the role of JavaScript is very less. Like for example, if you want to validate something, you use JavaScript. That's it. It is not structured. It doesn't have any routing. It doesn't have features like communicating with the backend server. Nothing. It was used for very simple purpose like validation, etc. But our client-side framework, which we are using now, the role of JavaScript is very huge. It is going to take care of so many things. Like, for example, if you want to communicate with the server, JavaScript will automatically take care. So AngularJS has its services which will easily communicate with web APIs to bring data from the backend. So all these things, since it is taking care, the role of backend is very minimal. The role of backend is just to serve the request which is coming from the UI. For example, if I am asking, say, this is my ID, give my name, it will go to the database, pick that data, send it to the client. That's it. So the role of backend has reduced to a greater extent. Whereas once the data has come, parsing it, validations, or two-way binding, all these things are taken care by the JavaScript. So basically the role of JavaScript has increased, and that is the main reason why we are migrating to the client-side framework. This one I think I explained it to a bigger extent. Server side and client side rendering. So what is the big difference? Who renders HTML? Can you please answer me, who renders HTML in server side? And on the client side?
Browser.
The client side work, JavaScript basically. Okay, the next important thing is separation of concerns. This also I explained already. Separation of concerns means every layer should be responsible only for its work. For example, even if we divide our application into 4 layers, database, business, API and UI, API should not know who is going to consume it. Okay. This example, let us say I have an API which returns all states if I have a country ID. That's it. It should not know which application or which browser or which method, who is going to call me. It doesn't have to worry about it. So if your application is written in such a manner that each layer is independent of other and each layer doesn't aware about the other layers, it is called separation of concern. So every layer should be responsible for doing an action, and that layer should not worry about who is going to use it. Right? So this is very much implemented in the client-side frameworks when compared to ASP.NET Web Form. As I said, when you have a client-driven programming, when the button is clicked, some code is written to do some action, and if you want to do the same action for another button, you have to again write that code, right? But here, Since the APIs are present separately, the functionality is moved to the APIs and any client will call it. The same API can be called 10 times in 10 different pages. You don't have to repeat it. Yeah, this is a very, very important point. The third one, ability to provide client-side MVC. MVC, everybody is aware, right? Model View Controller. Till now, we have MVC only on the server side. But client-side frameworks like AngularJS is capable of providing Model View Controller in the client side itself. Okay? So now what happens? So till now, whenever server returns some data to it, and whenever there is an HTML content, what you can do means, you can, for example, if there is a control with say ID equal to 1, you can take this control and do some action, say modifying color, etc. That's it. Its role is restricted. But in our modern client-side frameworks, it is like this. So in the client side itself, it is divided into different layers. So whatever you have the HTML content here is not complete client side nowadays. It's just a part of client side. It's just a part of view. Before view, you have another layer called as controller, which will be explained in the AngularJS training. And before controller, you have another layers like services, factories and all. So the role of the services and factory is to communicate with Web API, which will communicate further with the business layers and database and all. But here we didn't have that opportunity. Okay. So in the controller, what you can do means you have some functionalities like two-way binding and all. Two-way binding, are you aware of what two-way binding is? Let us say I have a text box. I have a label here. Okay. I'm asking you to write a functionality. When you type something here, it has to reflect in this label without doing much work. In a typical ASP.NET Web Forms, what you will do when you write something here, you need a button, for example. You need a click event. That click event will copy its content to this. Postback happens. Okay. But if the same thing happens, say magically, this is controller, this is view. So this have, for example, say a name variable. So if you type something in a name variable, it is binded like this. In the controller, what you will do means you will initialize that variable and bind to both these controls, text box as well as label. So what happened then? The client-side framework will automatically find where and all that variable is binded in that page. And whatever you type in that, it will be automatically reflected in all the controls which is binded. So that's why we are moving to this client-side framework, so that it can do stuffs like this. This is not the only thing that client-side framework does. This is one of the samples the client-side framework can provide you. So the basic point from this ability to provide client-side MVC is, it's not like a simple HTML where we can do minimal actions. It's a lot of MVC actions which we can do on client-side itself without pushing it to the server. Okay. One of its disadvantages is page rendering is slow due to DOM manipulation. As I said earlier, now it's not going to only show what is written by the server, since it is going to do so many actions like this, it will take some more time when compared to the server-side applications, but it is going to happen only one time. So only when you load the page for the first time, it will take a few milliseconds greater than what a server-side application can do. But from next time onwards, since the client side holds all this code, performance will be very high. Now, some people ask when we explain about client-side framework, why we require first of all framework itself. We have AngularJS, we have Backbone.js, we have React.js and all. Everything ends with JS. So everything is JavaScript, right? Then you can do everything with the JavaScript itself. Why we require client-side framework? Anybody thought about this? When we came for this session, we came for AngularJS. Okay, fine. We at least know AngularJS is written in JavaScript, right? So in that case, why I have to go for a separate framework? Why I can't do same stuff with JavaScript? Anybody thought about it?
More organization.
Sorry?
More organization.
Okay, more organized. Okay. Anything else?
Wider.
Reusability. Anything else? We'll see here. So, what is the JavaScript? A scripting language that was designed to use within a browser. Of course, without JavaScript, we don't have anything. But before going into jQuery, before going to client-side framework, there is one more thing that came in between, which is nothing but jQuery. jQuery, many of you must have used, right? So why we use jQuery? Again, the same question. Why we don't use JavaScript? Why we use jQuery? Lot of built-in methods that can be reused. For example, if you see that example, you just want to change the background. If you have to write using JavaScript, when the page loads, you have to write a onload method. That onload method goes, and from the DOM, you have to select the body and its style and its background and color. So you have to do this many steps. But if you use jQuery, you can simply do it like this. It will do the same thing which is present here. But if you want to do for multiple pages, you have to repeat this code in different pages. Okay? So the purpose of reusing a code is already satisfied by the jQuery itself. Fine? Then now another question arises. In that case, we can go with jQuery itself, right? It has so many reusable built-in methods. Why I should go for client-side framework? Any idea? So when I said why we should use jQuery, you said we have reusable already existing methods, packages are available, I can simply use it. Fine, that is good enough. Now, in that case, I can do everything with jQuery itself, right? Why I have to go to the client-side framework? jQuery has so many advantages. For example, if you want to manipulate a DOM element, you can simply do it using the $tag. Then CSS manipulation also it can do. It can communicate with backend using Ajax. It can handle events, then animations. It can do a lot of stuff. In that scenario, why you have to quit jQuery and go to client-side framework? Actually, I explained all this in this session. Separation of concerns, right? That is one of the main reasons. Because again, if you use jQuery, it's not structured, it's not organized. Someone has written a package, it is there, you can simply use it. So like this, for example, if you want to change the body background, you can call the body and do it. It is not organized, right? It doesn't have two-way binding, right? So in order to avoid this only, we are further moving. It's not like if I'm using a client-side framework, I should completely remove jQuery. It's not like that. In our applications itself, we are using both AngularJS and jQuery. It has its own advantages. But if you want to completely remove the load from the server, JavaScript and jQuery is not completely enough at all. So that's why we are going to move to the client-side framework, and these are one of the main reasons why we are going to the client-side framework. these things you will see in the upcoming session detail. I'll explain as much. First advantage is RESTful API. Yes, with jQuery you can use Ajax, but if you want to use RESTful API completely with its actual meaning without pushing all the code to an HTML page, you need to move to the client-side framework. As I said here, if you have to use Ajax, for example, if you want to communicate with the backend using Ajax, if you are using jQuery, you will call it from here, right? So again, you are doing everything in the view part. But if it has to be organized like an MVC, your client-side framework, it will call from here. So the RESTful API, which is put, get, delete and all, you can do it using client-side framework. Integration test, that's not that important. MVC pattern support, I explained. Yeah. The next very important thing is templating. Have you heard about a term called templating? At least tell me what's a template.
Predefined structure.
Predefined structure. Okay. So again, I have an HTML page. Say I have a div in it. Okay. My backend is returning a JSON to me, which has a variable called name, value. As I said earlier, now the pages will not be returned, only JSON data will be returned to me. Okay. Now it has to show here means I should do something, right? I have JSON data, I have template with me, but will it do automatically? If you use JavaScript, no. If you use jQuery, no. But if you use any client-side frameworks like AngularJS, it will do it automatically for me. So what I will do here means, let us say the name of this JSON is user. What I will do here, I do something like this. User dot name. Okay. So if I simply write an HTML like this, what it will do means, whenever there is a JSON data coming to me with this user name, that name will be automatically displayed here. So this is called as templating. If you have to do this stuff using JavaScript, you have to write so much code behind your HTML file, but this can be automatically handled by the client-side framework. I gave you a very simple example. In the coming sessions, we will give you so many complex examples, like we have something called as directives and all. If you use directives and all, the amount of work it will reduce is very, very high. Okay. So for now, just remember, templating is one of the most important features why we go for client-side frameworks. Okay. Then two-way data binding. I think I already explained it. Yeah, dependency management or dependency injection. Dependency injection you would have heard, right? What is dependency injection? Most familiar interview question. What's a dependency injection?
Keeping the different components in one place. Like keeping the different components in one place. So whenever we require, we can keep it.
Exactly. Let us say I have a page. I am writing an application for calculator. Okay. Calculator has different operations like add, subtract, multiply, and all. Okay. And that calculator is used in my application in multiple places. Okay. I have 10 pages. Among the 10 pages, in 8 pages, I have that calculator functionality used. So instead of writing that add, subtract, multiply, and all, I'm dividing all those functionality into small modules. Okay. So what I will do, So this is nothing but service and factory. This is controller and this is view. You have an Angular. And I will write my functionality in different JS file. For example, add means it has to do so many stuff. So those code will be present here. So instead of initiating it in my page every time, or instead of writing that same code, I will simply pass this to my controller saying add. Okay. So if you want to use, for example, you have a variable a equal to 5, variable b equal to 6. And simply what you will do means add of a comma b. Okay. So you have a big module which does so many things, and if you want to use it inside, you just pass its name and use it inside your controller, or even services. You can use one in the other like that. So this feature is called as dependency management. And again, if you ask me, can't we do dependency management with JavaScript? Yes, we can do, but we have to write so much code to implement that functionality. But these functionalities are automatically coming as part of client-side frameworks. Then deep link routing. As I initially said, before 5 or 10 years back, we didn't have the routing functionality on the client side. But now the client-side frameworks are smart enough to have their own routing functionality. For example, I'll give a small glimpse. If I come into a page, say Facebook, okay, it has so many sub pages, like for example /home, /notifications, right? So if you have to navigate between these pages, it's not like it will go to the server and then search for the home page, notification page and all. Since they will be rendered in the initial stage itself, since it's a single page application, navigations between the sub pages will be automatically handled by the client-side framework. Okay, again this is not possible using JavaScript or jQuery. Fine. And the final very important thing is localization. What is localization? What is localization? Awake, asleep.
Using the system settings like calendar, date, languages to the client side, based on the client side.
Partially true, yes. Have you ever developed an application that will be used by different language users? Nowadays, most of the applications, right? For example, if you are going to write an application only in Hindi, it is not going to work at all. It has to be in multiple languages. Especially if you are using it in India, it has to be in multiple languages. So, if I am developing a page and it has to be rendered in different language for different users, so will you keep on developing different pages for different users? No, you can't duplicate the same code everywhere. So you are going to write only one HTML. But the content which is going to be present in that HTML is going to differ, right? If you see the same any social networks in different languages, the content will be completely different, but that doesn't mean they have developed different HTML pages and all. So showing different languages for different users is localization. Localization was there in all our traditional applications, ASP.NET Web Forms, MVC and all. But there it was again taken care by the server. But nowadays the client-side frameworks easily take care of localization. For example, if you take AngularJS, we have a simple JavaScript file where we have a JSON like this. So for example, A equal to small abc in one language. Have another A equal to capital ABC. Okay. Let us assume this is local-en. I can say Dutch. Okay. So in your client side, whenever you change the language from English to Dutch, it will simply go and search these files to find its value. Here I said div, inside div I have some value which will be rendered by the backend, right? So this will be taken care by backend, but it will be having a label, right? It's like this. Okay, so when a user who knows English physics, it should be displayed like this. When a user who knows Dutch physics, this label content has to be changed, right? So this will be automatically taken care by the client-side framework. So whenever it finds a label like name, it will go and search here. Okay, so based on the language, it will search different JS files and take data from that. Okay, so if you have to do the same content using ASP.NET, again the load will be put on the server side, but these things will be automatically handled by the client-side framework. So basically, these are not the only advantages why we are going for client-side framework, but these are one of the biggest advantages why we are moving towards client-side frameworks. Okay, so RESTful API understood, MVC support, templating, two-way data binding also explained, dependency management, then routing, validations, localizations, all these things will be taken care by the client side, and the pressure or load put on the server side is very minimal. Any doubts among these points? Like what are they? Why we cannot do with existing technologies like that? Any doubts? So before ending, I just want to mention about some of the other advantages of client-side framework. These 3 R's, always remember. If someone asks you why you have to go for single-page application or why you have to go for client-side framework, remember these 3 R's. Very simple. Reach, responsiveness, and round trip. Reach means if you have to develop an application that will be commonly accessed in different tools, for example, using web browser, using your mobile application, tab and all, you don't have to write different styles or different code for different tools. It can be handled easily with a client-side framework with a single code. That is called as reach. Second one is responsiveness. As I explained, you don't have to wait for so much time for the page to render the data back to you. It will be immediately rendered. So that is called as responsiveness. Third thing is round trip. I don't have to go do a complete post back of it. And the other advantage is, as I again said initially, your browser will be caching a lot of data for you which will be reused, which is not there in the existing frameworks. Then you have complete control over the HTML, unlike web forms. Okay. I explained about AngularJS. All these things I explained from the Angular point of view. But that doesn't mean AngularJS is the only client-side framework available. But from the various options available in the market, AngularJS is one of the easy as well as a framework with a lot of features. Okay, so you can also go for other frameworks like Knockout.js. There is something called as Backbone.js. Facebook uses their own client-side framework called as React.js. Okay, so if you are interested, you can go and have a look at those frameworks also. There's one more thing is TypeScript, the last point. So what happens, people really wanted to move towards a JavaScript framework, but traditional developers found it little difficult to come out of the traditional development technology, because in JavaScript you don't have, for example, IntelliSense and all. So to avoid that, Microsoft came up with something called as a TypeScript. So TypeScript mostly looks like your traditional C# code. It's a JavaScript code. So if you have TypeScript installed in your machine, if you write code in TypeScript, it will be automatically compiled into your JavaScript. So what I suggest is don't go and look at TypeScript initially. First work with raw JavaScript, raw AngularJS, and once you are familiar with AngularJS, then you can have a look at the TypeScript. So that's it for today. So from next session onwards, we will purely look into AngularJS. And the basic purpose for today's session is why we require client-side framework, and I hope I would have conveyed it to a good extent. Still, if you have any doubts, you can ask now or you can send mail to me. If you don't have any questions, you can.